John Parker never imagined his peaceful retirement would be interrupted so abruptly. After decades spent commanding naval vessels across the globe, he sought solace on the quiet shores of Clearwater Lake. The lake was his sanctuary, tranquil waters stretching like a mirror beneath endless blue skies, bordered by thick pines, whispering secrets in the breeze. Here, he planned to spend his days tending to his beloved boat, the Seafarer, and soaking up the freedom he'd earned. But the serenity shattered the moment he found the envelope on his front porch, slipped under the welcome mat, as if in the dead of night. It was unmarked, no return address, just a single typed page inside that chilled him to the bone. Remove your boat from the dock immediately. Failure to comply will result in consequences you won't like. This is your only warning. No signature, no name, just a stark demand cloaked in menace. John's eyes narrowed as he read the letter again. Who would want his boat gone? The Seafarer wasn't just any vessel. It was a symbol of his lifelong dedication to the sea. It was a testament to freedom and resilience, a story told in every scratch on its hull and every polished brass fitting gleaming under the sun. His neighbors, a mix of retirees and families, had greeted him warmly, until recently. The local HOA president, a sharp-eyed woman named Claudia, had never seemed fond of the boat. She preferred neat lawns and quiet, color-coded conformity, and John's arrival with his old weathered vessel disrupted the pristine image she wanted to enforce. Yet, this letter wasn't signed by Claudia or anyone from the board, at least not openly. It felt like a threat whispered through shadows. That evening, John sat on his porch, the letter clenched in his fist, watching the last orange light slip beneath the trees. The dock creaked softly as the gentle waves lapped against the boat's hull. The lake was calm, but the tension in the air was anything but. He wondered, was this just the beginning? A sudden rustle from the bushes made him snap his head toward the darkness. Nothing, just the wind, or someone watching him from the shadows? His pulse quickened. Determined not to be bullied, John decided to attend the next HOA meeting. If this was about his boat, he'd confront it head-on. But deep down, a cold knot of unease twisted tighter in his gut. This fight would be more complicated than a simple dock dispute. It felt personal, almost calculated. As the moon rose high and the stars blinked silently above Clearwater Lake, John resolved to protect what was his, not just the boat, but the freedom it represented. Whatever forces were trying to push him out, he wouldn't go quietly. The lake had its own stories, and soon, John was about to write a new chapter, one that no one in the HOA would forget. The night before the HOA meeting, John couldn't sleep. The letter's chilling threat echoed in his mind like a sinister drumbeat. Who wanted his boat gone? And why? The next morning, the community clubhouse buzzed with quiet murmurs as neighbors gathered for the monthly HOA meeting. John stepped inside, clutching the letter in his jacket pocket like a hidden weapon. The room was filled with familiar faces, some curious, others guarded, none openly hostile, but the undercurrent of tension was unmistakable. At the head of the room sat Claudia, the HOA president. Her posture was rigid, and her eyes flicked coldly over the crowd before settling on John. A subtle, almost imperceptible smirk played at her lips. The meeting began with routine business: budget approvals, landscaping updates, parking restrictions. Then, Claudia cleared her throat, her voice sharp and precise. "We've received several concerns about the dock area," she announced, eyes fixed on John, specifically regarding boats that do not comply with community guidelines. Murmurs rippled through the room. John's heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady as he asked, "May I see those guidelines? I wasn't aware my boat violated any rules." Claudia's smile tightened. "The guidelines are clear to all homeowners and have been in place for years. They're designed to maintain the aesthetic and safety of our community." John's gaze swept the room. Most neighbors avoided his eyes, but a few whispered behind cupped hands. The atmosphere was heavy, like the calm before a storm. Later, John stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. As he stood near the dock, he noticed a cluster of people talking quietly, glancing his way. One woman, a sharp-featured neighbor named Linda, approached him hesitantly. "John, She whispered, "There's more to this than just your boat. The HOA board, they want to control everything around here. The dock is just the start." John's curiosity deepened. "Control? What do you mean?" Linda glanced over her shoulder nervously. "They don't want anyone who disrupts their plans. The boat represents freedom, and that scares them." Before he could ask more, a sharp shout from the clubhouse door drew their attention. Claudia was addressing a small group of board members, her voice low but fierce. "We can't let Parker set a precedent," she said. "If he wins this, the whole neighborhood uses control. We have to be united, no exceptions." John's blood ran cold. This was no simple neighborhood dispute. The HOA's grip was tightening, and he was standing directly in its path. That night, as he sat by the lake watching the seafarer gently sway, John's mind raced. Whoever was behind this had power, influence, and a secret agenda. The calm surface of Clearwater Lake hid murky depths of conflict and ambition. Determined to uncover the truth, John resolved to dig deeper into the HOA's history and the strange rules they claimed justified their demands. He had a feeling this fight would be about more than just a boat, and the lake itself might hold the key to his survival. The next morning, John sat at his cluttered kitchen table, a steaming cup of coffee forgotten beside him. The letter, the veiled threats, the cold hostility from the HOA, it all nagged at him like a puzzle missing its final pieces. Determined to find answers, John turned to the dusty boxes of paperwork he brought with him, property deeds, old maps, and legal documents dating back decades. Something told him the key to this battle lay buried in the lake's history. Hours passed as he scanned through brittle pages and yellowed maps. Then, tucked inside a forgotten folder, he found it. A peculiar, nearly illegible clause in the original subdivision covenant, drafted over 50 years ago. The clause stated that the lake and its immediate shoreline were owned collectively by the original landowners. But with one startling exception, the rights to manage the lake and all watercraft usage were reserved to any property owner who held a controlling interest in the surrounding acreage. John's pulse quickened. According to the document, the lake wasn't just a shared amenity. Someone could legally claim exclusive authority over it if they owned enough land. He glanced at the map again. Over the years, the surrounding parcels had been sold off in pieces, but a surprising pattern emerged. John's property encompassed the largest continuous stretch of lakeside land. Could it be possible he had more control over the lake than the HOA board realized? He leaned back, his mind racing. If he could prove this, the entire HOA's authority over the dock and boat regulations might crumble. The threatening letter, the meetings, the attempts to push him out, they could all be desperate moves to hide their own lack of legal control. But how to prove it? The documents were incomplete, and the HOA's records were notoriously opaque. He'd have to visit the county records office, dig deeper into the land titles, and maybe even speak with longtime residents who knew the lake's past. As the sun dipped below the tree line, John's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. He opened it cautiously to find a young woman, clutching a worn leather-bound notebook. "I'm Emily," she said quietly. "I live a few houses down. I heard about your fight with the HOA. I think I can help." John invited her in. Emily explained that she had been researching the neighborhood's history for years, fascinated by the lake's secret past and the mysterious origins of the HOA's rules. "There's more to that clause you found," Emily said, flipping open her notebook. "My grandfather was one of the original owners, and he told me the lake's ownership was always contested. The HOA formed to try to control the area, but legally, it's messy." John's hope surged. Together, they planned a nighttime trip to the county archives, where dusty ledgers and handwritten deeds awaited. If the HOA thought they had John cornered, they hadn't counted on him unraveling decades of hidden history. As darkness settled outside, John looked out over the seafarer, moored calmly in the fading light. The lake held secrets, and soon, those secrets would change everything. The night air was thick with a damp chill as John and Emily slid quietly through the winding streets toward the county archives. The small town had long gone to sleep, but for John, sleep was the last thing on his mind. Inside the archives, rows of towering shelves loomed in dim light, dust motes swirling in the air like tiny ghosts of the past. Emily's flashlight flicked nervously over the cracked leather spines of old books and fragile ledgers. Minutes stretched as they scanned through maps, deeds, and handwritten notes, their fingers tracing faded ink lines. Then Emily gasped softly, pointing to a stack of papers bound with a rusty clip. "These are older than the ones you found," she whispered. John carefully unfolded the brittle pages. The documents detailed lake ownership disputes from the 1960s, including court cases and testimonies. His eyes caught a passage describing a controlling interest in the lake reserved for one property owner who had purchased the majority of shoreline land after a series of bankruptcies and legal battles. "Here it is," John murmured, feeling a surge of triumph. "This confirms the clause. Whoever owns the largest stretch has management rights over the lake, above the HOA's rules." Emily nodded. "If you hold those rights, the HOA has no legal ground to force you off the dock." Their excitement was short-lived. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a distant clang outside the building. Both froze. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered, eyes wide. John grabbed her arm. "Stay close." They slipped out the back exit, moving swiftly through shadows toward the lake. As they approached the dockyard, a flicker of movement caught John's eye. Two figures were crouched near his boat, their faces obscured by hooded jackets. "Who's there?" John called out, voice steady but firm. The figures froze, then scattered into the dark woods with hurried steps. John hurried to his boat, heart hammering. His worst fears had come true. Someone was deliberately targeting the seafarer. The boat's hull bore fresh scratches, long, angry scars gouged into the paint. Ropes securing it were frayed and cut in several places. A cold anger rose in John's chest. This was no random vandalism. It was a message, intimidation, a warning. Emily placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "They're scared of you, John, and desperate." He nodded, scanning the still water shimmering under the moonlight. The quiet lake no longer felt peaceful. It felt like a battleground. The next day, John reported the vandalism to the local police, but they offered little hope. "Without witnesses or clear evidence, there's not much we can do," the officer said dismissively. Determined not to be cowed, John called an emergency HOA meeting. He planned to confront the board directly, demand answers and demand respect. But as he stepped into the meeting room, he sensed the eyes of the entire community on him, curious, wary, some clearly hostile. Claudia's cold gaze cut through the room as she rose to speak. "Mr. Parker," she said, voice smooth but sharp, "we're concerned this dispute is disrupting the harmony of our community. Perhaps it's best if you reconsider your position." John stood tall, meeting her stare without flinching. "I'm not going anywhere. Not my boat. Not the lake. Not without a fight." The room fell into uneasy silence. Outside, the sun burned away the morning mist, but the shadows around the seafarer had only grown darker. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog. Whispers followed John everywhere, some wary, some hostile. The HOA's efforts to isolate him seemed relentless, yet beneath the surface, something was shifting. One late afternoon, as John tended to the seafarer near the shore, an elderly woman approached slowly, leaning on a cane. Her silver hair framed a face weathered by time and quiet wisdom. "John Parker?" she asked softly. He nodded, intrigued. "Yes, I'm John. Can I help you?" She smiled faintly. "I'm Ains. I've lived here nearly all my life, since before the HOA was formed. I've watched this neighborhood change, and I've seen what happens when people try to control the lake without understanding it." John gestured to the boat. "I'm fighting to keep my right to dock here, but the HOA is relentless." Ains's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "You have more power than you know, but the fight isn't just legal. It's about history and people's fears." She invited John to her modest lakeside cottage. Inside, walls were lined with faded photographs, old newspaper clippings, and yellowed journals. "This lake was once free to all," Ains began, pointing to a black and white photo of children swimming and boats scattered freely. "But when the HOA was formed, things changed. They wanted control, not just for safety or beauty, but for power. John listened intently as Ains revealed a long-hidden truth. Decades ago, a small group had secretly bought the majority of lakeside parcels, creating the HOA to consolidate power. Many original owners had been forced out or silenced. The letter you received, Ains whispered, was no random threat. They want you gone because you threatened their control. John's mind raced. He'd suspected as much, but hearing it from someone who'd lived it gave the danger a sharper edge. Ains handed him a worn notebook. My grandfather kept records, names, dates, deals they don't want anyone to know about. If you want to win this, you'll need this. That night, John pored over the notebook by the light of a flickering candle. It detailed secret meetings, questionable land deals, and even a few whispered bribes. The HOA's grip was built on lies and fear. But there was one name that stood out, the HOA president, Claudia. Ains explained how Claudia's family had been deeply involved in the early deals, giving her a personal stake in maintaining control. John's resolve hardened. This wasn't just a battle over a boat. It was a fight against decades of corruption and greed. Before leaving, Ains gave him one last warning. They'll try to scare you. Watch your back. But you have allies. Don't forget that. As John walked back to his boat under a sky heavy with stars, a fierce new determination burned inside him. With Ains's help and the truth on his side, he was no longer just defending the seafarer. He was challenging the entire system. And the lake, with all its secrets, was finally ready to reveal its true power. The courthouse was imposing, its stone pillars towering like silent sentinels, guarding decades of secrets. John felt a familiar calm settle over him as he stepped inside, the fight shifting from whispered threats to cold, hard law. Emily was by his side, clutching the leather-bound notebook Ains had given them. The evidence inside was damning. Secret land deals, forged signatures, and legal loopholes the HOA had exploited for years. John's lawyer, a sharp-witted woman named Claire, was already waiting, her eyes gleaming with determination. This case isn't just about your boat, Claire said firmly. It's about ownership, control, and exposing the HOA's overreach. We're going to challenge their entire authority over the lake. As the hearing began, the HOA's lawyer, a slick, confident man named Reynolds, smiled thinly. He presented the HOA's bylaws, insisting they had the right to enforce boat restrictions and dock rules. But Claire was ready. She unveiled the original subdivision covenants, the forgotten clause about lake ownership, and the decades-old court documents John and Emily had uncovered. Ladies and gentlemen, Claire declared, the HOA's claim to exclusive control over the lake and its docks is legally tenuous at best. According to historic property law, Mr. Parker's property holds the controlling interest, granting him rights the HOA cannot override. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. John caught a glimpse of Claudia in the back, her expression darkening. The hearing stretched on for hours. Witnesses testified, documents were scrutinized, and tensions flared. The HOA tried to discredit the old records as irrelevant, but Claire's relentless questions exposed gaps and contradictions. At one point, Reynolds smirked and said, Mr. Parker may own property by the lake, but community harmony requires compromise. This isn't just about ownership, it's about maintaining order. John stood, his voice steady. Order built on fear and intimidation isn't harmony, it's control. And I refuse to let them bully me or anyone off the lake. The judge leaned forward, eyes sharp as a hawk. The evidence presented here calls for a thorough review. I will take the case under advisement and issue a ruling soon. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, sensing a story bigger than a neighborhood dispute. Cameras flashed as John stepped into the sunlight, flanked by Emily and Claire. We're not done, John told the crowd. This lake belongs to all of us, and no one, not even the HOA, can take that away. Back at home, a storm was brewing. The HOA board convened in secret, Claudia's voice low but urgent. We can't let him win this, she hissed. If he takes control, everything we've built falls apart. Find a way to stop him, whatever it takes. John knew the battle wasn't over. The legal gambit had shifted momentum, but the real war, against power, greed, and secrets, was just beginning. As night fell over Clearwater Lake, the seafarer rocked gently in its slip, a silent symbol of defiance and hope. John was ready. Days after the courtroom showdown, John thought the hardest battles were behind him, but Clearwater Lake had one more secret to reveal, one that would change everything. One evening, as he returned to his boat after a late meeting with Claire and Emily, a strange sight caught his eye. Near the shoreline, a small crowd had gathered around a floating platform, hastily built and lit by flickering lanterns. Curiosity pulling him forward, John approached cautiously. At the center of the platform stood Claudia, her expression fierce, her voice ringing clear over the water. "This community belongs to all of us," she declared, "and the HOA will continue to protect our interests, regardless of legal tricks or empty threats." The crowd cheered, but John noticed something else. Several unfamiliar faces, shadowy figures who hadn't been at any previous meetings. His instincts screamed warning. As the crowd dispersed, a tall man approached John silently, his gaze sharp and unreadable. "I'm Marcus," he said quietly. "I'm here to help." John narrowed his eyes. "Help? After everything?" Marcus nodded. "Not all of us want the HOA's control. Some of us want change, but it has to come from the right place. I've seen what Claudia and her board have done, and I want no part of it." John's wariness battled with a flicker of hope. Why come forward now? Marcus glanced around nervously. "Because the truth is worse than you think. The HOA's been hiding something. A plan to privatize the entire lake. No more public access. No more freedom." John's heart skipped. "That's why they want my boat gone." "Exactly. You represent a threat to their scheme. But with your rights and our support, we can stop them." Over the next few days, Marcus brought evidence, documents, recordings, and testimony from other homeowners fearful of speaking out. The plan to privatize was real, designed to raise fees and restrict access to those who could pay. John felt the weight of responsibility deepen. This wasn't just about a dock or a boat anymore. It was a fight for the lake's soul. That night, as he stood by the seafarer, John looked across the water. The lake shimmered, reflecting 1,000 points of light, stars, lanterns, and hope. With Emily, Claire, and now Marcus at his side, John prepared to expose the HOA's secret agenda to the whole community. But he knew the final battle would be the hardest, because those desperate to keep power rarely surrender without a fight. The community hall was packed beyond capacity. Every neighbor, from longtime residents to newcomers, had come to hear the truth and to witness a battle that would decide the future of Clearwater Lake. John stood at the front, flanked by Emily, Claire, and Marcus. Behind them, a large screen displayed documents, photos, and video recordings exposing the HOA's secret plan to privatize the lake and evict anyone who opposed them. Claudia sat near the back, her face pale but defiant. The room crackled with tension, part outrage, part disbelief. John's voice was steady as he addressed the crowd. "For years, the HOA board has tried to control the lake for their own gain. They've threatened me, vandalized my property, and tried to silence anyone who stood in their way." He clicked the remote, revealing a recording of Claudia discussing the privatization plan in a secret meeting. Gasps filled the room. "Today," John continued, "we have a choice. Let a few control what belongs to all of us, or stand together to protect our rights, our homes, and our community." The crowd erupted in applause, but Claudia stood, her voice sharp. "This is a smear campaign. You're twisting the truth to undermine the HOA. We've kept this neighborhood safe and beautiful." "Safe and beautiful?" John shot back. "By silencing voices, by pushing people out? This isn't safety, it's control." Then, unexpectedly, Marcus stepped forward. "I used to support the HOA," he said, "until I saw their greed firsthand. I'm here to tell you the truth, no matter the cost." One by one, other neighbors stood, sharing stories of intimidation, of fees raised without explanation, of docks removed without notice. The tide had turned. Faced with mounting evidence and public outcry, Claudia faltered. The HOA board voted to suspend the privatization plan and agreed to open transparent discussions about lake management, including John's rights. But just as the meeting seemed to close, a final twist shattered the room. Emily held up an old deed she had discovered, one revealing that the original covenant included a clause protecting not only the lake, but also any natural resources beneath it, including rare minerals. The revelation meant the lake wasn't just a community resource. It was potentially valuable beyond imagination. Suddenly, the stakes were higher than ever. The lake's future would attract interests far beyond Clearwater's quiet shores. John smiled, a spark of determination lighting his eyes. We'll protect this lake, not just from the HOA, but from anyone who tries to exploit it. As the meeting adjourned, neighbors mingled with renewed hope and unity. John looked out toward the seafarer, its reflection shimmering on the water's surface. The fight had been fierce, the secrets deep, but Clearwater Lake was safe for now. And John knew that as long as he owned the land, the boat, and the truth, he'd never let anyone take that away.